My father tore my college acceptance letter down the middle while I stood at the kitchen table, still wearing my high school cap and gown. The two halves fluttered to the linoleum, one landing face up so I could still see the words, "We are pleased to inform you." He didn't say congratulations. He said, "You go to that school, you're dead to me." I picked up both pieces. I smoothed them flat. And I made him a promise he'd never forget. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the same smell that clung to every corner of our house because Dad brought the factory home with him every night. He stood by the counter, still in his work shirt with the logo half peeled off, arms crossed over his chest. My mother sat at the table, hands folded, staring at the salt shaker like it held answers. My younger sister Maya hovered in the doorway, 16 and wide-eyed, clutching her phone. I had just walked in from graduation. My robe was draped over a chair. The letter had arrived that morning, tucked in the mail between bills and coupon circulars. Full scholarship, engineering program, state flagship university. I'd opened it alone in my bedroom, read it 3 times, then came downstairs to tell them. Dad snatched it from my hands before I finished the first sentence. He read it in silence, jaw tightening with each line. Then he tore it. Not a hesitant rip, but a deliberate, clean split right through the university seal. "You think you're better than this family?" he said. I didn't answer. I was watching the pieces fall. One landed near my shoe, the other skidded toward the fridge. "You think some piece of paper makes you special?" His voice was rising. "I built this life with my hands. Your grandfather built it before me. You walk away from the factory, you walk away from everything." The factory, Brennan Industrial Supply, a squat metal building on the edge of town that made custom hinges, brackets, and fasteners for construction companies. 30 employees, 50 years in the family, and hemorrhaging money for the last 10. I bent down and picked up both halves of the letter. I held them together, aligning the torn edges. "I'm going," I said. Mom flinched. Maya gasped. Dad's face went red. "Then you're dead to me," he said. "You walk out that door to some university, don't come back. You won't have a family, you won't have a home, you'll be nothing." I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Maya. She was crying silently, clutching her phone against her chest. "Okay," I said. I walked upstairs. I packed a duffel bag. I took my laptop, my textbooks, the shoebox of savings from 2 years of weekend shifts at the diner. I left my cap and gown on the bed. When I came back down, Dad was still in the kitchen, standing in the same spot, arms crossed. Mom was crying now too, but quietly, the way she always cried. "Eli," she said. Just my name. Nothing else. "I'll call," I told her. Dad turned his back. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back. I got in my beat-up Honda, the one I'd bought myself with diner money, and I drove 3 hours to campus. I parked in the student lot. I sat there for 20 minutes, hands shaking on the wheel, staring at the taped-together acceptance letter on the passenger seat. Then I went to find my dorm. The first semester was brutal. Not academically. I'd been the top student at my high school, and I knew how to study. But loneliness is its own kind of weight. I called home twice. Mom answered once and whispered that she missed me before Dad's voice boomed in the background and she hung up. Maya texted sporadically, always brief, always careful. "Miss you. Dad's still mad. How's school?" I worked. I took 18 credit hours and got a job in the library, shelving books for $8 an hour. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I avoided social events because I didn't have money for cover charges or new clothes. I studied in the engineering building until they kicked me out at midnight, then studied in my dorm until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I thought about Dad every day, the look on his face, the way he'd torn the letter, the flatness in his voice when he said, "dead to me." I also thought about the factory. I'd grown up hearing the machines, the punch press, the grinder, the hiss of the hydraulic lift. Dad used to take me there on Saturdays when I was little, before he decided I was old enough to resent. I'd sit on a stool in the corner and watch him work, watch him move through the space like he was part of the machinery. He was good at it. He was proud of it. But pride doesn't pay bills. I'd seen the spreadsheets he left on the kitchen counter. I'd overheard the phone calls with suppliers. I knew the factory was dying, and I knew he didn't know how to save it. I met Professor Diane Okoro during office hours in October. She taught industrial systems design, and I'd been struggling with a project on supply chain optimization. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a gap-toothed smile, and she didn't let me get away with surface-level answers. "Why are you really here?" she asked after I fumbled through an explanation of my problem. "I need help with the project," I said. "No," she leaned back in her chair. "Why are you here? In this program, in this office?" I hesitated. Then I told her. Not everything, but enough. The factory, my father, the torn letter. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she tapped her pen on the desk. "You want to prove him wrong," she said. "Yes." "Good. Use that." She pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "But don't just prove him wrong. Prove yourself right. Show me what you'd do differently if that factory were yours." I stared at the paper. "It's a class project. It's also your life," she said. "Make it count." I rewrote the entire project. I didn't just optimize a hypothetical supply chain. I optimized Brennan Industrial Supply. I analyzed every inefficiency I could remember. I researched competitors, pricing models, automation options. I proposed a full restructure, new equipment, renegotiated supplier contracts, a shift towards niche high-margin products instead of low-margin bulk orders. Professor Okoro gave me an A++. She also gave me her card. "Ever want to make this real? Call me." I didn't call her, not yet, but I kept the card in my wallet, tucked behind my student ID. I kept working. I kept studying. I made the dean's list first semester, then again second semester. I joined the Engineering Honor Society. I got a paid internship sophomore year at a manufacturing consultancy, and I spent 10 weeks learning how mid-size factories streamlined operations, cut costs, negotiated with suppliers. I took notes on everything. Maya called me in the spring of sophomore year. It was late, past 11, and I was in the library finishing a thermodynamics problem set. Her voice was thick with tears. "Dad laid off 6 people today," she said. "Mom's scared. She thinks he's going to lose the factory." I closed my textbook. "How bad is it?" "I don't know. He won't talk about it, but I heard him on the phone with the bank. He was yelling." She paused. "Eli, he looks so tired." I wanted to ask if he ever mentioned me. I didn't. "I'm sorry, Maya," I said. "I wish I could help." "You can't," she said. "He won't let you." After we hung up, I pulled out Professor Okoro's card. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it back in my wallet and returned to my problem set. Junior year, I stopped working at the library and started working for Professor Okoro. She'd launched a consulting side business, advising small manufacturers on efficiency and modernization, and she needed a research assistant. The pay was better, and the work was exactly what I needed. We analyzed case studies. We visited factories. We sat in boardrooms and watched owners make decisions that saved or sank their businesses. I learned that most small factories fail because the owners love the work but don't love the business. They're engineers at heart, craftsmen, and they resist change even when change is the only option. They take loans they can't afford. They undercut competitors instead of differentiating. They burn out slowly, then all at once. I thought about my father every time we visited a struggling factory. The way he'd stand at the punch press, hands on the controls, like he could will the business into success through sheer force of effort. The way he'd snap at employees who suggested new processes. The way he'd refuse to believe the world was changing around him. I graduated summa cum laude at the end of junior year. Not valedictorian yet, that came senior year, but top of my class, and companies were already reaching out with job offers. I turned them all down. I had a different plan. I called Professor Okoro. I said, "I'm ready." "For what?" "To make it real."
We met at a coffee shop near campus. I brought a binder. Inside was everything I'd been working on for 3 years. A full business plan for revitalizing Brennan Industrial Supply. Market analysis, financial projections, equipment lists, a timeline. I'd even sketched out a pitch for investors. She read it in silence, sipping her latte, occasionally making notes on the margins. When she finished, she closed the binder and looked at me. She said, "This is solid, but you know it's not enough." "I know. I need capital." "You need a lot of capital. Retooling a factory isn't cheap. And you need leverage. Your father won't sell to you just because you have a good plan. He'll sell if he's desperate." She raised her eyebrow. "You want to wait for him to fail?" "I want to be ready when he does." She studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. "I know some people. Small business investors. They fund turnarounds for struggling manufacturers. High risk, high reward. If you're serious, I'll make the introductions." "I'm serious." "Good, because this isn't just about the factory. You're about to bet your entire future on proving a point to a man who disowned you. You need to be sure that's what you want." I thought about the torn letter, the empty-seated Thanksgiving, the silence every time I called home and Dad refused to pick up. It's not about proving a point. It's about doing what he couldn't. Professor Okoro smiled. "Then let's get to work." Senior year, I took a reduced course load and spent the rest of my time building the case. Professor Okoro introduced me to a venture group that specialized in distressed asset acquisitions. They were skeptical at first. I was 21, fresh out of undergrad, proposing to buy and restructure my estranged father's failing factory. But the numbers were good, and Professor Okoro vouched for me. They agreed to a provisional funding commitment, contingent on the factory actually being available for purchase, and on me proving I could execute the plan. I graduated in May. Valedictorian. 4.0 GPA. I gave the commencement speech in front of 2,000 people. My mother and Maya were there. They sat near the back. I saw them when I walked across the stage. Mom was crying. Maya was holding her hand. Dad wasn't there. After the ceremony, I found them in the crowd. Mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Is he okay?" I asked. She pulled back. Her eyes were red. "He's at the factory. He's always at the factory." Maya hugged me next. "You did it, Eli. We're not done yet."
I drove home the week after graduation, not to my parents' house. I rented a room at a motel on the edge of town, the kind with paper-thin walls and a flickering neon sign. I didn't tell anyone I was back. I spent the first 2 days driving past the factory, watching the parking lot, counting cars. 6 cars on Monday, 5 on Tuesday, 30 employees, and most of them weren't showing up anymore. On Wednesday, I parked across the street and waited. Dad's truck was there, the same rusted Ford he'd been driving since I was a kid. I watched him come out at 7 in the evening, shoulders slumped, face gray with exhaustion. He got in the truck and sat there for 5 minutes before starting the engine. I followed him home. I watched him walk into the house. I watched the lights come on in the kitchen, then the living room. I sat in my car until midnight, engine off, hands on the wheel. Then I drove back to the motel. I went to the factory the next morning. The front office was small and cluttered, dominated by a metal desk covered in invoices and past due notices. A woman I didn't recognize sat behind a desk, mid-50s, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when I walked in. "Help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Brennan." "He's in the shop. You have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me." She frowned. "Name?" "Eli Brennan." Her face changed. She stood up slowly, eyes widening. "You're his son." "I am." She hesitated, then pointed toward the door to the shop floor. "Go ahead." The shop was loud. The punch press was running, a rhythmic clang that echoed off the metal walls. The air smelled like oil and hot metal. I found Dad at the grinder, hunched over a piece of steel, wearing safety goggles and gloves. He didn't notice me until I was 10 feet away. When he looked up, he froze. "Hi, Dad."
I turned off the grinder. He pulled off his goggles. He stared at me like I was a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "I think we do." He turned away, hands gripping the edge of the workbench. "You made your choice, Eli. You walked away." "You told me to." "And you did it. So what do you want now? Forgiveness? Congratulations?" His voice was bitter, sharp with old anger. "You got your degree. Go use it somewhere else." I took a breath. "I want to buy the factory." He turned back around. His face was unreadable. "What?" "I want to buy Brennan Industrial Supply. I have investors. I have a plan. I can turn it around." He laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You want to buy my factory?" "Yes." "You want to take everything I've built and run it yourself?" "I want to save it." "You're drowning, Dad. You're going to lose it anyway. Let me buy it before the bank does." His jaw tightened. "Get out." "Dad?" "Get out!" His voice cracked. "You think you can waltz back here after 4 years and take my life's work? You think I'd sell to you? You're nobody, Eli. You're a kid with a degree and an ego." I didn't move. "I'm the only option you have left." He stepped toward me, fists clenched. For a moment I thought he might swing. Then he stopped. His shoulders sagged. He looked old, suddenly older than I'd ever seen him. "I'd rather lose it than give it to you," he said quietly. I nodded. "Okay." I turned and walked out. I didn't leave town. I stayed at the motel. I met with a local business attorney, filed paperwork, set up an LLC. I contacted every supplier the factory worked with and every client still on the books. I made quiet offers, built relationships, positioned myself. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, the bank foreclosed.
The foreclosure auction was held on a Tuesday morning in the county courthouse. A dozen people showed up. Most were curiosity seekers or scrap dealers looking for cheap equipment. 2 were legitimate bidders, a regional manufacturing group, and me. Dad wasn't there. Mom told me later that he'd refused to come, that he'd spent the morning in his truck in the factory parking lot staring at the building. The auctioneer was brisk and efficient. He read the property description, the terms, the starting bid. The regional group opened at $50,000. I countered at $75,000. They went to $90,000. I went to $125,000. They dropped out. "Sold," the auctioneer said, "to Eli Brennan for $125,000. I signed the papers. I shook hands with the attorney. I walked out of the courthouse into bright summer sun, and I sat on the steps for a long time, holding the deed. I owned my father's factory. I spent the first week doing inventory. The building was in worse shape than I'd thought. Equipment outdated, wiring frayed. The roof leaked in 2 places. But the bones were good. The location was good. The client relationships, though strained, were salvageable. I called Professor Okoro. "I got it," I said. "Congratulations. Now the hard part starts." "I know." "You're going to need help. Good people. People who know the business." "I know that too." She paused. "Are you going to ask him?" "Ask who?" "Your father. You're going to need someone who knows that building, those machines, those clients. Swallow your pride, Eli. Ask him." I hung up. I stared at the phone. Then I drove to my parents' house. Dad answered the door. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were hollow, his face unshaven. When he saw me, his expression didn't change. "What do you want?" he said. "I want to offer you a job." "You want to offer me a job?" "Yes. Floor manager. You know the operation better than anyone. I need you." "You need me." He shook his head. "You took my factory and now you need me?" "I didn't take it. The bank did. I bought it so it wouldn't be scrapped. I'm giving it a second chance. And I'm giving you one too." He stared at me. "You're giving me a second chance?" "Yes." "You told me that you were dead to me." "I remember." And you still want me to work for you? I don't want you to work for me. I want you to work with me. I took a breath. I'm not doing this to punish you, Dad. I'm doing it because I love what you built. I always have. But it needs to change, and I think deep down, you know that. His face crumpled. For a moment, I thought he was going to cry. Then he straightened, jaw tight. I'll think about it, he said. He closed the door. I spent the next 2 weeks hiring. I brought back 4 of the laid-off employees. I hired a new accountant, a young woman fresh out of school who understood modern software. I renegotiated contracts with 3 major suppliers, leveraging the relationships I'd built during my research. I installed new safety equipment and started repairs on the roof. Dad didn't call. On the 15th day, he showed up at the factory. It was 6 in the morning. I was in the office, reviewing invoices. He walked in without knocking, still wearing his old work shirt, and stood in the doorway. "I'll take the job," he said. I looked up. "Okay. But I'm not your employee. I'm your partner. We do this together, or we don't do it at all." I stood. I walked around the desk. I held out my hand. "Deal," I said. He stared at my hand. Then he took it. The first 6 months were brutal. Dad and I clashed constantly. He wanted to keep doing things the old way. I pushed for automation, for efficiency, for modernization. We argued about equipment purchases, about client priorities, about scheduling. More than once, I thought he was going to quit. But he didn't. And slowly, grudgingly, he started to listen. We installed a new CNC machine in October. It cost $40,000, and Dad fought me on it for 2 weeks. But once it was running, once he saw how much faster and more precise it was than the old manual equipment, he stopped complaining. He started asking questions. How does it work? What else can it do? Could we use it for custom orders? By December, we'd rehired 12 employees. By March, we were breaking even. By June, we were profitable. Dad started smiling again. Not often and not easily, but sometimes I'd catch him in the shop, running his hand over a finished piece, nodding to himself. He started teaching me things I'd never learned. Little tricks, shortcuts, the rhythm of the machines. I started teaching him things he'd resisted. Software, supply chain logistics, market positioning. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. But one evening, after everyone else had gone home, he found me in the office. I was finishing payroll, and he stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "I was wrong," he said. I looked up. "About the letter, about telling you to stay. I was wrong." I didn't know what to say. "I was scared," he said. "Scared you'd leave and never come back. Scared you'd be better than me. Scared I'd lose you." He paused. "And I did lose you, but you came back anyway." I stood. I walked over to him. "I didn't come back for you," I said. "I came back for this, for the factory, for what it could be." "I know. But I'm glad you're here." He nodded. His eyes were wet. "Me too." We expanded in the second year. We started taking custom orders, high-margin specialty work that the old factory would never have considered. We hired a sales rep. We launched a website. We brought total employment back to 35, more than Dad had ever managed. Professor Okoro visited in the spring. She walked the shop floor, inspected the new equipment, reviewed the financials. When she finished, she smiled at me. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I said, nodding toward Dad. She looked at him, then back at me. "No, you did it. He helped, but this was your vision." Maya started working at the factory part-time during her senior year of high school. She was good with people, good with organization, and she took over scheduling and client communication. Mom started doing the books. It became a family business again, but different this time, built on respect, not obligation. Dad and I still argued. We probably always would, but the arguments were different now. They were about the work, not about us. On the 4th anniversary of the day he tore my acceptance letter, I framed the two halves. I hung them in my office, right next to the deed to the factory. Dad saw them when he came in to review a purchase order. He stopped. He stared.
"Why'd you keep that?" he asked. "To remember," I said. "Remember what?" "That I made you a promise, and I kept it." He looked at me. Then he looked at the letter. Then he walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son," he said. It was the first time he'd ever said it. By year 5, Brennan Industrial Supply was thriving. We'd doubled revenue. We'd won a regional manufacturing award. We'd been featured in a trade magazine article about family business revivals. I still kept Professor Okoro's card in my wallet, even though I didn't need it anymore. I kept the torn letter on the wall. I kept the memory of walking out that door with a duffel bag and a taped-together dream. Because some things you don't forget, and some things you don't forgive. Not entirely. But you do move forward. You do build something better. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the people who hurt you show up and help you build it. Dad worked the shop floor until he was 70. Then he transitioned to part-time consulting, teaching new hires the old skills, the handwork, the craftsmanship that machines couldn't replace. He and I had coffee every Sunday morning at the diner where I used to work weekends. We talked about orders, about equipment, about the business. Sometimes we talked about other things. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Just sat and drank our coffee and watched the town wake up. Maya took over operations when I shifted to strategic planning. Mom retired, but still came in once a week to check the books, just to make sure we were doing it right. And me? I kept the factory running. I kept it growing. I kept proving every single day that the kid who got disowned for chasing a dream knew exactly what he was doing. The torn letter is still on my wall. I look at it every morning. And every morning, I remember the promise I made. I kept it.